So I just got home from watching The Boy and the Heron by Hayao Miyazaki.
A lot of strange things happen in this place.
So I came to Miyazaki pretty late in the game. I have not seen all of the Studio Ghibli films, nor have I seen every Miyazaki film, because yes, he made stuff before Studio Ghibli. But I've been a fan ever since I began watching Studio Ghibli films. In particular, my favorite film from Miyazaki, which I've made a video about, here's the thumbnail of that. It's The Wind Rises. It's a story about Japan during World War II, and if you've seen Oppenheimer, it's basically the Japanese side of that story. It's about the man that created the most deadly plane during World War II and his grief and feelings about it afterwards. And this film's kind of a lot like that. This film deals with grief and loss and how to navigate the world and also what you stand for. The original title of The Boy and the Heron was How Do You Live? Or at least it's the title in Japanese, and it's very fitting. In the same way, I would say that this film is similar to a movie like Life of Pi or What Dreams May Come. There's a surreal element to this film. I mean, there's a surreal element to almost every single Miyazaki film. But this film tends to deal with how would you like to live. This film starts with a boy, and without giving too much away, in the first few minutes you see that he is living in World War II era Japan. Something tragic has happened to him, and he spends the rest of the film trying to grieve the loss that he's had. He moves to this totally different place, which is very normal if you've seen a Miyazaki film, is totally normal, and then weird things begin to happen. In a way, you're watching Miyazaki, in a weird way, deal with his own feelings around his life. As he's getting older, he was born in 1940, so he's in his 80s, and he seemingly continues to say that this is going to be his last film. I don't know who believes him or not, but if this is truly his last film, it feels apropos, because it's a story about how you want to write the story of your life, how you want to see the world around you. There are so many elements to this world building that Miyazaki is known for, right? There's so many things that, like, in every Miyazaki film, there's like a constant stream of like more surreal, more weird world building that kind of catapults the main character to wherever you're going. In this story, there's a ton of world building, but there's a feeling that Miyazaki sees himself as both the boy and his elder grandfather, granduncle, and I feel like you're watching Miyazaki as a director, as a writer, as an animator and filmmaker, say out loud that the world that he built, the worlds that he built, because of all of the different animated films and all of the different stories that he wrote, the worlds that he would lose himself in, he chose that path. But there's also something to be said about the real world, and getting lost in all of these imaginative places takes you away from what you could be doing in the real world. This is getting philosophical. The interesting part about this entire film, I don't think that Miyazaki is wanting to explain away everything. I don't think that he wants you to explain away everything. Actually, leading up to this film, he did 0 interviews, although he famously doesn't do a ton of interviews. The way that the trailer is made, the way that any of the press going into this film was made, is so that you, as the viewer, can kind of discover it as it goes along. It's a 2-hour film that, until the third act of this film, I did not really know how to describe it. But then all of a sudden, everything just clicked, and I knew what he was trying to say, or at least I had an impression of what Miyazaki was trying to say to me. This idea that the more that you spend in your own world, dealing with your own things, your own problems, and kind of being selfish. And like, I understand selfishness to some degree, and I think that he does as well. Sometimes you need to escape the real world. But every time that you choose to escape the real world, you are also not doing good within the real world. And that kind of became really apparent to me by the third act of this film. And it was something that I wonder if Miyazaki struggles with. That he struggles with, he made this art and he made all these films, and they will last longer than his life will ever last. But he spent so much time working on that maybe he didn't spend enough time working on the real world to make it as fantastical as the stories he wanted to tell. Maybe that's something to look at. That we as a people often get bundled up into our own selfishness or our own thoughts, our own, and people who are joyful, people who are sad. We get lost in those feelings. We get lost in our own things. That we don't look at the greater world around us. And when we do look at the greater world around us, we see some of the terrible things that are going on, and we just hide back in our cocoon, rather than taking the fantastical and implementing them into the real world. Interestingly, I saw this film as a double feature, an unintentional double feature. I just bought 2 tickets to the movie theaters to go see this film and then Wonka. Paul King, as a writer and a director, he did the Paddington films. He's now done Wonka. He wants to implement charm and joy and goodwill into so much of his world building and characters. And the heart of his films always comes back to treating people with kindness and seeing the world as an opportunity. And I think that that's where Miyazaki was also going with The Boy and the Heron. That yes, there are times where you're going to have to grieve, and there are times where you're going to have losses in your life. And I understand that, I feel it. My grandmother, during 2020, passed away the week of Thanksgiving, which, if you're not from America, Thanksgiving is kind of a weirdly big deal for family events. And not having someone in your family at that event that they've always been at, it's a little rough. But The Boy and the Heron and Wonka, I guess, are both saying that if you treat people well, if you bring joy, if you bring care, and you allow yourself to process your emotions through other people, through the real world, that you can truly make the world a better place. It might not be the perfect world. I don't think that we'll ever get to some utopia. Not in the same sense that Miyazaki's tried to create these utopias, but even within The Boy and the Heron, he is saying that the worlds that he has built are imperfect. If you look at the upper layer, if you don't look deep enough, yes, they look perfect. But the moment that you see the deeper understanding of these worlds that he's built, they don't make sense. The Boy and the Heron says that specifically when it comes to different animals that are living within this world. But the real world can make sense, and it can be better if we choose to make it better. Do I recommend The Boy and the Heron? Absolutely. It's getting a lot of award buzz. I think that it might be one of those films that gets a ton of awards coming out of the season. I actually have a feeling that The Boy and the Heron might do better than Across the Spider-Verse, the other film that I think a lot of people are rooting for when it comes to award season and animated films. I think that this film is just that important to Miyazaki, to animation, and to storytelling and filmmaking as a whole. It's that good. It's enjoyable. Go see it. That's all I got.